Hello. Good day, whatever time of the day this meets you. From the previous post, I said we were going to look at domestic abuse, and I know I've done something on domestic abuse before, but I'm trying to break things down for us to be able to understand and know how to handle issues with domestic abuse. And I'm just going to start by saying I do domestic abuse because I'm trained in domestic abuse. I've had years of training in domestic abuse, not just domestic abuse, also what to do when you leave an abusive situation, how to avoid entering into an abusive situation, abusive relationship, because a lot of times there are red flags along the way, but we ignore these red flags. At times, you're not even aware that these are red flags. So, things to look for will be coming up towards the end of this, which will be I'll try as much as possible to make these videos as fast as possible. And I don't know how many lessons or how many videos I'm going to make. Please don't say, oh, I'm not in an abusive relationship, so I don't need this. You might have somebody that needs this. You might be in position to help save a life or help prevent someone from entering into an abusive relationship. Let it be said that I spoke about domestic abuse. I stand with victims of abuse, with victims of rape, with victims, the vulnerable victims of abuse. I stand with you. A lot of people don't have a clue what abuse is about. A lot of people don't understand it. And a lot of times there are questions you don't ask. Questions like, why doesn't she leave? I would do that in a video on its own. Why it's not easy for a woman going through abuse to just pack up and leave. Why so many things, why people wouldn't talk about it. It's reported that a woman is likely to be assaulted 35 times before she seeks help. Every 3 days, a woman dies from domestic abuse in England. I'm not talking of all over the world. I'm not talking of countries where there is no law or the laws are not working. I'm talking about England. In the year, I think about 10 years ago, the statistics I'm talking about now was 10 years ago, was done about 10 years, somewhere like 13 years ago. Every 6 seconds, a woman is assaulted in her home. Every minute there is a call to the police concerning domestic abuse. A lot of times, domestic abuse will be viewed from the angle of the woman because 80% of the times it's a woman that is a victim. It's 20% of the time it could be a man, but most of the time it is a woman. Like I think we have about 22 men. I think the statistics talks about 22 men dying from domestic abuse per annum, and 112 women are victims that dies. I'm not talking about just being a victim, but that actually lost their lives. This statistic was done 13 years ago. So a lot of times we tend to view domestic abuse from the angle of a woman. But let's also bear in mind that there are some men there, some men out there that are victims of abuse. Because domestic abuse is not a respecter of race, your position in the society, your financial status, your education, your religious beliefs. Domestic abuse does not respect that. It's not a respecter. It cuts across every strata of the society. I'll start by defining what domestic abuse is, because a lot of us actually think we know what domestic abuse is, but we really don't know what it is. We just assume. So I'll start from scratch, define what domestic abuse is. I'll cut it up into two pieces: domestic and abuse. What is domestic? When you talk about domestic, you're talking of something that pertains to the family, that pertains to the household. because another name for domestic abuse is intimate partner violence, IPV. It pertains to the home, the house, domestic. And when you talk of abuse, you talk of abuse, abnormal use. They say when purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. Abuse. Let me just look at the dictionary meaning of abuse. Abuse means to treat or to use or treat as to injure or damage. When there's injury, it doesn't need to be a physical injury. When there's damage, I, I always say, in fact, one of the worst abuse cases or incidences are emotional abuse. Emotional abuse, because people don't get it. Physical abuse, you could easily report it. Oh, see my arm, he stabbed me here or there. But with emotional abuse, the victim is being gradually turned into a mental health patient. Is being destroyed. Everything is being destroyed. So abuse to treat as to injure or damage. Before, domestic abuse used to be called domestic violence, but it later changed to domestic abuse because a lot of times that you don't need to have violence. You can kill somebody with words. I've come across people that are so abusive, my mind cannot just grasp how a human being, especially a man, how a man could be so abusive. I do not understand. For women, they say women have their mouths are like razor blades. Yoruba people will say, Elenu razor. You see, when a woman is, you'll be like, okay. But when a man goes lower than that, in fact, in this case, I had to just do some digging. I had to dig into his past. Was his father abusive? Did he grow up in an abusive? Because when a perpetrator cannot just understand how abusive he is, most times you need to go dig into his background because dysfunction has become his normal way of life. Verbal abuse, verbal diarrhea has become a norm. When people grow up with dysfunction, normal situations are abnormal to them. So domestic violence was turned into domestic abuse because you don't really need to have violence. If there's emotional, if there's verbal, if there's a lot of things, which we'll talk about later on. I want to make these videos to be very short. Domestic abuse is can be described as any behavior between people in an intimate relationship, behavior that scares, intimidates, humiliates, isolates, or seeks to control the other person. It's a pattern of incidents. It's normally called controlling, coercive, threatening, degrading, or violent behavior. When a behavior has this kind of ingredients, it's controlling, manipulative, coercive, threatening, degrading, or violent. It is abuse. Domestic abuse it's all about power and control. It's all about manipulation. It's all about being in charge of another person's life. It's all about wanting to be the alpha and omega. It's all about control. And you find that in a lot of incidences, People will say, oh, maybe because he's angry, or maybe because he's stressed, maybe because he was laid off work, maybe because he was drunk. All these things do not make somebody to become abusive. Have you ever seen somebody that was drunk and just not doing anything? You see, when you squeeze an orange, it's the juice inside the orange that comes out. When you squeeze an orange, there's no way apple juice will flow out. There's no way tomato juice will flow out. So when you have people that are domestically abusive, we call them pups. A lot will say, oh, I couldn't control it. I saw red. I saw red and I lost it. Do you realize that these people, if somebody knocks on the door, the red goes, the flash goes. If they were about to slap you or to stab or to kick, they will stop and wait for the person to go. That tells you something. That tells you they can't control it. They can't control it. And have you seen people that are always abusive in the public? Most times behind closed doors. They choose their partners. And a lot of daughters that grow up in houses where there is abuse, as I said earlier, because dysfunction is their norm, 80% of the time, they will pick an abusive partner. They will pick a partner that's got such traits. A daughter that has an abusive father will pick a partner that is abusive because that's her definition of a man. If a man is loving, showing attention, no, 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 I don't want that kind of much. He's not a man. A real man is in charge. They'll end up picking an abusive partner. And a son who has a father whose mouth runs like diarrhea, 80% of the time, he's going to have oral diarrhea because that's his norm. That's what he's used to. He cannot comprehend, he cannot understand why it is wrong. That's his norm. 80% of the time, they will take after the perpetrator. It's only a 20% that will stand and say, no, my mother was impacted by this. I will not repeat it. I will break this. Only 20%. And that is why it's important for us to ensure we protect our children because the atmosphere of the house will dictate the kind of partner they pick in future. Domestic abuse is about power and control. In a house where one seeks to dominate, you see, where there is love, you don't need to grab for power. As a Christian, if we look at even I think Philippians 2, Jesus was equal with God. He did not say that equality to be grasped with God. God is not going around seeking who to enforce himself on. He seeks sons and daughters. He seeks love. He seeks fellowship. Look at the relationship of Christ and the church. And that is why love brings. Sorry, I'm not talking about marriage. Let me just stop it there. Let's continue on domestic abuse. Any woman, any man can experience domestic abuse regardless of race, ethnic or religious group, sexuality, class, disability, or any other classification you can have out there. Actually, we're finding out that the abuse within same-sex relationship is the same. You'd have thought, oh, they say, oh, a woman to woman, a man to man, abuse is still the same, if not worse. A lot of times, victims of abuse do not even really understand, cannot even grasp. They can't grasp what they are going through. And a lot of times, because of victim blaming and victim shaming, it makes them more powerless. It makes it more difficult for them to reach for help. And the society is not designed to help. A lot of times, women are told to stay in an abusive relationship, even when, and this has resulted in a lot of deaths. This has resulted in a lot of deaths. We need to be careful how we address domestic abuse issues with couples. I'm not saying once your husband says, huh, you run out the door. I'm not saying when your wife says no food or the food is too, the spice is too much, you run out the door. But when it comes to issues and instances that are life threatening, please, if you have no knowledge about domestic abuse, refer them to a domestic abuse agency so that that death will not be on your neck. Domestic abuse includes any behavior that causes physical harm, that arouses fear, or coerce or force somebody to do what they normally would not like to do. It's not always easy at the beginning of a relationship, but when you know what to look for, when you see those red flags, you know it's time to run. We'll do the red flags later. I'll try and get my notes together and see what I'll do next. But today I'm just giving a preamble to on domestic abuse. Domestic abuse does not look the same in every relationship. Each relationship is unique. Each relationship has its own characteristics. Each relationship has its history or cultural affiliation. So it's not everything that you see in this relationship that say, no, why are you allowing your wife to watch TV? That's domestic abuse. But there are some general things that they have in common. And we'll look at these general things. One on the list is destructive criticism. When a partner utters so much destructive, so much derogatory words, and at times you find that the husband would have so done it inside the house that he would take it outside. He will call everybody he can and still be using these same derogatory words he uses inside the house. Still use it outside. Abuse, abuse the spouse, abuse the spouse family, abuse the local government chairman, abuse the governor, even the prime minister will be abused. Derogatory words, destructive criticism, verbal abuse, shouting, mocking, accusing, name calling. It's one of the things when you notice a spouse is just so extremely abusive, has no respect. has no respect for women, has no respect for his mom. Don't expect him to show you respect. Another thing is using tactics to put pressure on the spouse, sulking, threatening, at times ignoring, silent treatment, persistent disrespect. Even if you go to a restaurant, see how he treats people. See how he treats people that he feels are under him. See how he treats people that are not as privileged as him or her. Disrespect. They can look at someone older than them and abuse, and they're okay with it. Persistent putting down, persistent disrespect, breaking trusts, lying, embarking on a project to malign, to isolate you. Will say evil about you to people so that they can dissociate. Will say evil about people to you so that you can move from them. And you see, all this will end up isolating, harassing, threatening, and above all, denying. We have something called gaslighting. We have one of the things they do is to make you feel you're going crazy and to make other people think you're crazy. Oh, discouraging you, insulting, demeaning you, controlling everything you do, looking at you as if you are less than a human being. You know, a lot of things like that. When you notice such things, while you're courting, while you're going out, while you're dating, run, baby, run. Run, baby, run. Run. Run as fast as your legs can carry you. Because you do not want to subject yourself to a lifetime of insults. You do not want to end up as a um, mental health patient. Domestic abuse is more common than we think. And domestic abuse destroys the children. It destroys, totally destroys. It cracks up the children and crumbles them. I pray God will help us. You know you're in a domestic, you know you're in an abusive relationship if you have to walk on eggshells all the time. You don't know what you will do that will trigger the verbal diarrhea, that will trigger physical assault, that will trigger any kind of violence or abuse. You don't know what you will do that will make them see red. You walk on eggshells. If you feel afraid of your partner, and you have to be extra careful. You can't be yourself. You can't be free. You are always afraid of getting them angry. You can never do anything right. And you're made to believe it's all your fault. It's what you're doing that's making them treat you that way. You're always being humiliated publicly and privately. You're always being criticized, being put down, being belittled. You're always embarrassed. and you're always being blamed, you need to check that relationship. It might not be a healthy relationship. I would like to stop here. I'm already on 25 minutes. I'd like to stop here. We'll continue looking at different kinds of abuses, and we'll wrap it up with how to spot a perpetrator before you enter a relationship. God bless you. I hope you're blessed by this. Please let your daughters listen to this. Let them avoid a lifetime of counseling. Let them avoid the torment. Let your boys also listen to it. Let them avoid being a perpetrator or a victim of domestic abuse. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you, everyone that's always shared my video, that's always looked at it. Please, if you have suggestions, ideas, if you want me to put it on Facebook, on YouTube, or maybe get the audios or things like that, let me know. I'll see what I can do. I'm not a tech expert, but this is about creating awareness. Not just about, it's not even about just talking. It's about creating awareness, and it's about saving lives of people and making our homes and our societies, our communities, a healthier place to live in. God bless you. I appreciate you. Thank you.